आप भी अलग-अलग वर्ड इन्वेंट कर देती हो मॉम, देखा है मैंने। अभी क्या नीचे कोई वर्ड यूज़ किया जो कि मुझे समझे में नहीं आया कि एक वर्ड भी नहीं था। अपने से कुछ तो बोल दिया। हाँ, भोजपुरी में भी नहीं बोलते आपने अपने से जैसे अगर चाचा बोलते ना फुसफुड़ा था, कुछ भी। बिहार बिहार ने तो अलग ही जगहों में तरक्की पाई है। वो न्यूज़ पढ़ी थी एक बार, एक दिन न्यूज़ में आ रहा था कि एक बंदे ने यूट्यूब से देख के बंदे का किडनी का ऑपरेशन, हार्ट का ऑपरेशन कर दिया। है, मर गया था वो। यही होता है ना जब डॉक्टर उसको हल्के में ले लेते हैं। डॉक्टर ने मुझसे पागलपंती नहीं है क्या? एक सर्जन को बनने में ना 15 साल लगते हैं मऊ। नहीं बट ये भी सोचो ना, जो इंसान करा रहा होगा वो कितना गरीब होगा, क्योंकि कुछ खाना नहीं बचा, समझी? और उस पे जीने की कितनी भूख होगी।
In this lesson, we're going to start the Amazon project, and we're also going to learn a very useful technology called Git. So first, let's take a look at the Amazon project to see how it works. We're going to go to our browser and create a new tab at the top, and we're going to type supersimple.dev/projects/Amazon and press enter. So this is going to be the project we're going to build in this course. This is an e-commerce website that looks like Amazon, where we can see a list of products on the home page, and then we can add these products to a cart by clicking Add to Cart. And then we can see our cart by clicking the top right. And on this page, it will show us which products are in our cart, and it will also show us the cost of our order, including shipping and taxes. And once we're ready to create an order, we can click this button to create the order, and it will take us to this page, which shows us a list of our past orders. We can also track our order by clicking this Track Package button, and it will take us to this page, which tells us the progress of our order, whether it's preparing, it's shipped, and it's delivered. So that's an overview of the project we're going to build. This is a complex multi-page website where the different pages interact with each other to create a full app. The first thing we're going to do is to download the starting code for this project. We're going to create a new tab, and here we're going to type github.com/supersimpledev/javascript-amazon-project and press enter. You can also find the starting code in the description by clicking here and then going to the links for this lesson. And on this page, we can see the starting code for the Amazon project. So this code contains all the HTML and CSS that we need. The reason we're going to use some starting code instead of writing all of this ourselves is because this course is focused on JavaScript, not HTML and CSS. If we were to write all of this code ourselves, it would just take up too much time, and it would be an entire course by itself. If you want to learn how to create this code, you can check out my HTML and CSS full course, which will teach you all the skills that you need. But for this JavaScript course, we're going to start with the HTML and CSS here, and we're just going to focus on adding JavaScript to this website.
Managing your clients and sales is easy when you're just starting out. But as your business grows and so does your team, it might get challenging.
So now let's download all of this code. We can do that by clicking this green code button here, and then click Download Zip. Once that's finished downloading, we're going to go to our Downloads folder. So for me, it's this folder right here called Let's download all of this code. We can do that by clicking this green code button here, and then click Download Zip. Once that's finished downloading, we're going to go to our Downloads folder. So for me, it's this folder right here called Downloads. And then we're going to unzip this file by double-clicking it. And this will give us a folder that contains all the code. So we're going to select this folder and move it to our desktop. Next, let's go to our desktop. So we're going to close this for now, and I'll hide the browser. And on the desktop, we're going to select the folder that we downloaded, and we're going to rename this. So at the end, we'll remove main and press enter to rename it to JavaScript Amazon project. Next, we're going to take this folder and open it in our code editor. So let's open VS Code, and we're going to click File, Open Folder, and we're going to find the folder that we downloaded. For me, it's on the desktop, and it's this folder right here. So we'll click this folder, and then click Select Folder. And then we can close this welcome message. Okay, so now we have our starting code, and we're going to set up the project. So first, let's open our browser again, and we can close the GitHub page, as well as the tabs for the previous lessons. So we'll close these tabs right here, but we'll leave the final Amazon project open. Next, let's go back to VS Code, and we're going to open this project in our browser. So we're going to select this file, amazon.html. So this file corresponds to the home page here. So let's select this file, and then right-click, Open with Live Server. So I'm just going to rearrange my windows here so we can see these side by side. And now we're ready to begin. So let's take a look at the code that we have to start with. As I mentioned, all we have here is the HTML and CSS for this website. There's currently no JavaScript at all on this page. So one thing you'll notice is that we can actually create almost all of the website using just HTML and CSS. We actually don't even need JavaScript to create all of this. We're able to create the header at the top, as well as 3 products to start with. And this shows that HTML and CSS can pretty much create everything that we see visually on the website. Where JavaScript comes in is that JavaScript makes this website interactive. So right now, if we click the Add to Cart button, it looks pretty nice, but it doesn't actually do anything. And that's because we haven't added JavaScript yet. So the role of JavaScript is to make our website interactive after we created all the content and the styling. Now, before we begin adding JavaScript to this website, we're actually going to take some time and learn another very useful technology called Git. So Git is a technology that lets us track changes in our code. For example, do not follow along here, but let's say that I'm working on this website, and I go into my code editor, and I change some code here. So let's say that I add some code here, and then in this file, I'm going to delete some code. So just select some code and delete it, and then save. And then in this file, I'm going to change some code at the bottom. So now, let's say that I made a mistake, and I want to undo all the changes that I just made. So how would I do that? How would I remember all the code that I changed in the different files? So right now, this is really difficult, and this is a problem that we run into in bigger projects. We're changing lots of code in different files, and it's really hard to keep track of what code has changed. And this is where Git comes in. Git lets us track changes in our code, and it helps us solve this problem. So here's what it looks like if I have Git set up in my project. I can go into this section of VS Code. This section is for Git, And then here, Git will tell me which files I changed. And if I click these files, it will tell me which lines I changed and exactly which code I changed. If I want to, I can click this button. And if I can go into this section of VS Code. This section is for Git. And then here, Git will tell me which files I changed. And if I click these files, it will tell me which lines I changed. Section problem. So here's what it looks like if I have Git set up in my project. I can go into this section of VS Code. This section is for Git. And then here, Git will tell me which files I changed. And if I click these files, it will tell me which lines I changed and exactly which code I changed. If I want to, I can click this button to reverse all the changes in this file. I can also click here to reverse all the changes in all the files. So as you can see, Git helps us track changes in our code, and it lets us easily undo our changes if we need to. And this technology is really useful in bigger projects like this Amazon project, where we're going to be changing lots of code in many different files. So before we start this project, we're going to learn how to set up and use Git. The first thing we need to do is to install Git. To do that, we can go to this section of VS Code called Source Control. Now, if this section looks like this with a button Initialize Repository, that means you already have Git installed. Otherwise, if you're on Windows, you can click this button and then click Open, or you can go to this website directly and then click this link to download Git. Once it's finished downloading, we're going to run the installer and then just go with the default options. If you're using a Mac, you can click up here and then type terminal and press enter. And inside here, you're going to type Git and press enter, and then click this link and install Git. All right, after installing Git, we're going to restart VS Code. And make sure you have the Amazon project open. And now if we go into the Git section, it should look like this with the button Initialize Repository. So now that we've installed Git, we're going to set up Git in our Amazon project. We can do that by clicking Initialize Repository. If this button doesn't work for you, you can also try going to the terminal menu and click New Terminal. And then inside this terminal, type Git init and press enter. So a repository is just a folder where changes are being tracked. By clicking Initialize Repository, this turns the current folder, which is JavaScript Amazon project, init and press enter. So a repository is just a folder where changes are being tracked. By clicking Initialize Repository, this turns the current folder, which is JavaScript, is just a folder where changes are being tracked. By clicking Initialize Repository, this turns the current folder, which is JavaScript Amazon project, into a repository. And now all the changes inside this folder will be tracked by Git. So to start off, Git will tell us that all of these files are new files. And that's because we just set up this repository. So all of these files are considered new changes that we're starting to keep track of. Next, we need to configure a username and email with Git. Now don't worry, this information is not used anywhere online. This is just for Git to add an author to the changes that we make. So to configure a username and email, we're going to go to the top and open the terminal menu and click New Terminal. And then inside here, we're going to type git config user.name and double quotes. Track of. Next, we need to configure a username and email with Git. Now don't worry, this information is not used anywhere online. This is just for Git to add an author to the changes that we make. So to configure a username and email, we're going to go to the top and open the terminal menu and click New Terminal. And then inside here, we're going to type git config user.name and double quotes. Now, if this looks familiar to you and you've already done this before, you can skip this step and the next step. So between these double quotes, we'll pick a username that we want to use. So for me, I'll use super simple dev and press enter. And we'll also configure an email by typing git config user.email, double quotes, and between these double quotes, we'll put an email. So I'll put simon@supersimple.dev. And between these double quotes, enter. So now that we configured a username and email, we can close this terminal. Next, we're going to save these changes into Git so that Git will start tracking any new changes that we make. To save these changes, we're just going to type a message here describing what we changed. So let's just type the message, add the starting files. And then we're going to click commit. And if this pop-up shows up, we're going to click yes. So that will take all of our changes and save them into Git.
Hey developers, join us for the biggest AI competition with over $10,000 in cash prizes. Yep.
So now that we've saved those changes into Git, any new changes that we add will start showing up here. So let's do an example, and let's change some code in a couple different files for practice. So let's click this icon up here to show our code, and let's go into amazon.html, and we'll just change this title to intro to Git, and save. And then let's go into checkout.html. And at the top, let's actually remove the title, and save. And then let's open orders.html. And at the top, let's just add something to the title, like page. If we save, and then go into the source control section, or the Git section, it will tell us all the changes that we just made in our code in the 3 different files. If we click one of these files, it will actually tell us exactly which code that we changed. Now, if your Git section looks like this, where the changes are on top of each other instead of side by side, if you want to, that we changed. Now, if your Git section looks like this, where the changes are on top of each other instead of side by side, if you want to, you can change this by clicking these 3 dots here, making sure that inline view is unchecked, and also unchecking use inline view when space is limited. So now it's very easy to undo this code. We can just take the code on the left and then copy paste it on the right to undo this change. We can also click here to undo all the changes in this file. And up here, we'll undo this change. We can also click here to undo all the changes in this file when space is limited by clicking. Now, if your Git section, if we click one of these files, it will actually tell us exactly which code that we changed. Now, if your Git section looks like this, where the changes are on top of each other instead of side by side, if you want to, you can change this by clicking these 3 dots here, making sure that inline view is unchecked, and also unchecking use inline view when space is limited. So now it's very easy to undo this code. We can just take the code on the left and then copy paste it on the right to undo this change. We can also click here to undo all the changes in this file. And up here, we can also click this button to undo all the changes in all the different files. So that's an intro to Git. It helps us keep track of changes in our code, and it's very useful for bigger projects like this Amazon project, where we're going to be changing lots of code in many different files. If you want to learn about Git in more detail, you can check out my Git and GitHub full course in the video description. So now that we've set up Git, let's start the Amazon project. So first, make sure that this section is empty, and we've reversed all the changes that we made when practicing Git. Next, let's click this icon to show our files, and let's remove the previous code. And we're going to start in the amazon.html file.
क्या हुआ मॉम बताओ।
So first, let's take a look at the Amazon project to see how it works. We're going to go to our browser and create a new tab at the top, and we're going to type supersimple.dev/projects
है
Amazon and press enter. A list of products in our cart. It will also show us the to create the order package button. And here we're going to type github.com/super simple dev/javascript-amazon-project and press enter. You can also find the starting code in the description by clicking here.
हो सकता है भूल गए होंगे। बोल दीजिए कि अंदर रख दे। इतना वो भारी होता है, वो वाला कह रहा हूँ भरा हुआ। लो यार मोबाइल तो बैठो ना। ये यार क्या होता है, रख देना ऊपर रख देना। मुझे सूजा या किसी ने काटा है, कुछ कीड़े ने काटा है। ये किसका है भाई, एक तो मोबाइलों की किसका है। देखो पहले मैं क्या हुआ बताओ, कुछ नहीं हुआ। अरे दो यार कर देता हूँ निकाल। अरे अच्छा नहीं लगता यार मुझे, क्या कर रही हो यार, इस उम्र में लड़के को करना चाहिए तो मैं कर दूंगा, उठा दूंगा। मतलब गालू कह रही हो तो कुछ दिक्कत नहीं है। तो यार मेरा है, देख लो मैं पढ़ने बैठा अभी घड़गड़ गड़बड़ वो लगा लो। रोम ये वो रामबाण नहीं है कि इसको लगा दिया और हो गया।
If we were to write all of this code ourselves and see green code, so for me, it's this folder right here that contains all the code. And we're going to rename this. Open folder. And we're going to find the folder that we downloaded. For me, it's on the desktop, and it's this folder right here. So we'll click this folder, and then click Select Folder. And then we can close this welcome message. Okay, so now we have our starting code, and we're going to set up the project. So first,
अच्छा ये ले लीजिए।
let's open our browser again, and we can close the GitHub page, as well as the tabs for the previous lessons. So we'll close these tabs to open this project in our browser. So we're going to select this file, amazon.html. So to begin. Using
42 lakhs per annum.
Wow, 42 lakhs, that's your salary?
Yes.
And what do you do?
I'm an AI tools and chat GPT expert.
All right, and what degree did you pursue to become that?
Well, honestly, I didn't need to do any degree for it.
What?
Nor did I spend lakhs of rupees on any expensive programs.
So,
select some code. How it works. With here a username and email. Double quotes, and between these double quotes, will start showing up here. So let's do an example, and let's change some code in the 3 different files. If we click this, where the changes are on top, and also let's take the code on the left, and then copy paste it on the right to it helps us keep track of files. We've set up a page, and then open the tab for this file. It should say amazon.html up here. So we'll start by creating the list of products on the home page. So right now, we start with 3 products. If we go to the final project, we're going to add the rest of the products that you see here. And we're also going to make this interactive so that when we click the Add to Cart button, it will add this product to our cart. So let's go back to our project. And in order to create this, we're going to learn the main idea of JavaScript. So when using JavaScript, we usually do a 3-step process. The first step is to save the data. And then we generate the HTML. And finally, we make it interactive. Let's go through each step to create this list of products. So right now, we have 3 products on our page to start with. And we're going to add more products to this page. So let's start by finding the HTML for one of these products, because we can always just copy and paste this to create another one. Now we're going to learn a very important skill for bigger projects, which is how to find the code for something on this page. So let's say that we want to find the code for one of these products. We're going to right-click and click Inspect, and this will bring up the console. And I'm actually going to click these 3 dots and click this icon, then move the console to a separate window so that we can see the whole web page. So now we're going to click this icon in the top left, and we're going to hover over and click the thing that we want to get the code for. So I want to get the code for this entire first product, so I'll click in this space, and this will tell us that the code for the product is this code, a div with a class product-container. So now we're going to take this class and then search for it in our code editor. So let's open VS Code, and we're going to type Control F on Windows or Command F on Mac to search for code in this file. So we're going to search for the we're going to type Control F on Windows or Command F on Mac to search for code in this file. So we're going to search for the class that we saw earlier, which is product dash to search for code in this file. So we're going to search for the class that we saw earlier, which is product-container. And this will take us to the code for one of these products. So we can actually click the arrow on the left to collapse this code, and we'll see another product container, which corresponds to the second product. We can click this arrow again, and we'll see a third product container. Which corresponds to the third product.
Oh, समझ गया।
So that's how we find the code for something on the page. Now to add another product to this page, one thing we can do is to take this HTML and just make a copy of it at the bottom of the page. However, this is not a good idea because if we add lots of products, we're going to be copying this HTML over and over. And if we expand this, you can see that each product has a lot of HTML code. So we don't want to be copying all of this over and over again. It's going to be a lot of code and it's going to be hard to manage. Instead, another strategy is to generate this HTML code using JavaScript. So let's learn how to do that. Before we can do that, we need to add JavaScript to this page. So we're going to create a JavaScript file. So let's click up here to show our files. And first, let's create a new folder to contain all of our JavaScript code. So let's name this folder scripts and press enter. Next, let's click on our folder and we're going to click this icon to create a new file. And we'll name this file amazon.js and press enter. So this will be the JavaScript file for this HTML file. Next, inside this JavaScript file, let's type the code console.log hello, just to make sure that this works, and save. Next, we're going to load this JavaScript file in our HTML file. So let's go back to amazon.html, and then at the bottom of the code, we're going to scroll down, and then right above the closing tag for the body, we're going to add a script element. And we're going to give this element an attribute src, or source, equals double quotes, and we're going to load this JavaScript file. So this JavaScript file is in a folder called scripts. So here, we're going to type the folder name scripts, and then a / to go into the folder, and we'll load the file amazon.js and save. So now let's go back to the page, and we'll open the console, right-click, inspect, and then click the console, and it should display hello. So now we're loading JavaScript on this page.
Do you ever wonder why the food at a restaurant takes 20 minutes to come to your table? It's because of a system that assigns the...
So let's open up VS Code again, and we're going to generate all of this HTML using JavaScript instead. So the first step in our process is to save the data. What does this mean? Data means information. So in this case, the data is the information about our products. For example, the product's name, the price, ratings, and the image. So right now, the information about the products, or the data, is inside our HTML. So in our code, if we click here to expand this element, you can see that the information about the products, for example, the name and the image, is inside the HTML. So what we need to do is to take this data and save it inside our JavaScript so that our JavaScript can use it. So let's go to our JavaScript file, and I'm just going to put it down here so we can see it side by side. And we're going to move this data into our JavaScript. So let's remove console.log, and let's create a variable to save the data. So we'll type const, and let's name it products, and make it equal. And now we want to create something that closely matches our data. So in this case, we have a list of products. So in here, we're going to create an array, because an array represents a list. And now each product in the list has many values, like an image, a name, and a price. So we're going to use an object to represent each product, because an object lets us group multiple values together. So inside this array, we're going to create an object using curly brackets. And now inside this object, we're going to save the data for the first product. So first, let's find the data in our HTML. We're going to search for the product's name by typing Control F or Command F, and we'll search for black and gray. And this will take us to the code for the first product. So this is the name of the first product. So let's actually scroll up, and we're going to get the image for the first product. And we're going to take this and save it in our JavaScript. So let's select this code. We're going to right-click, copy, and then inside this object, let's create a property called image, and then here, right-click and paste. And let's save this as a string. So at the front, we'll type a single quote, and at the end, we'll type a single quote. So we just saved the image inside our JavaScript. Let's move on and save the name inside our JavaScript. So we'll scroll down, we'll select this code, and then right-click, copy, and in this object, we'll type comma and a property called name, a string, and we'll right-click and paste. Next, we're going to save the rating into our JavaScript. So we'll type comma, and let's create a property called rating, For the rating, there's actually two parts, the stars and the number of ratings that it has. So let's actually group these two values into an object because these values are related to each other. So in here, we'll make the rating an object. And each rating will have the stars, and for the socks, it's 4.5, comma, and the rating will also have a count. And for the first product, it's 87. Next, let's save the price into our JavaScript. So we'll create another property called price. And for the first product, the price is $10.90. However, JavaScript has problems doing math with decimal numbers or floats like this. So a best practice when calculating money is to calculate in cents instead of dollars. So for this reason, we're going to save the price as cents. So we'll save it as 1,090 cents. As a reminder, $1 is equal to 100 cents. And because we're saving in cents, it's helpful to rename this property to price cents instead. So now if we scroll up, we just saved all the information or the data about the first product into our JavaScript. Next, let's go to the end here and type comma and create another object. And we're going to save the data for the second product into this object. So feel free to pause the video if you want to try it yourself first. So again, let's find this product in our So now if we scroll up, we just Just saved all the information or the data about the first product into our JavaScript. Next, let's go to the end here and type comma and create another object. And we're going to save the data for the second product into this object. So feel free to pause the video if you want to try it yourself first. And we're going to scroll up a bit and find the image for this product of the product for the.
So do you know, like if you are someone who is trading in market for past 20 years and if there is some guy who is like trading market
the third product inside. Again, feel free to pause the video to try it yourself first. So and we'll search for the product name, which is adults plain cotton t-shirt. Create 0.5 all of our objects to have the same structure so that our code can handle each product the same. So that's what it means to save the data. we create something in JavaScript that closely matches the data that we have on the page. By the way, this is called a data structure because it structures or organizes the data, and this represents a list of products. So we usually use a combination of objects and arrays to create a data structure in JavaScript. So now that we've saved the data, the next step is to use this data to generate the HTML instead of writing the HTML manually. To generate the HTML, we can loop through this array. And for each of these products, we're going to create some HTML. So let's go ahead and loop through this array first. We'll scroll down to the bottom, and we'll type the name of the array, which is products, and then we'll loop through this array using a for each method. So we'll type dot for capital each, brackets, and inside we'll create a function using brackets, arrow, and curly brackets, and we'll give it a parameter called product. So I'm going to move this back to the top here so we can see more of the code. So the way that for each works is that it takes each object, saves it in this parameter called product, and then runs the function. So it takes the first object, saves it in product, runs the function, takes the second object, saves the product, runs the function, and so on. So for each of these products or each of these objects, we want to create some HTML. So inside this function, let's create a variable, const HTML equals, and we'll create a template string using backticks. And now inside this template string, we're basically going to copy all the HTML for one of these products. So let's go back to our HTML file. And how do we find the HTML for one product? So we learned this earlier. We can right-click, inspect, and then click the top left icon, and click the element we want to get the HTML for. So this HTML represents one product, and we can search for this class product-container in our code. So we'll go back to our VS Code. Inside the HTML file, we can Control F or Command F to search for code, and we'll search for the class product-container. And let's go to the first result. So we'll go to the first result, which is here, and let's copy all of the code inside this element. One trick we can do is to click the arrow on the left to collapse it, and then we'll select all this code, and we'll right-click, copy, and then inside our JavaScript file, inside the string, we're just going to right-click and paste the HTML. And if we need to fix the formatting, we can select outside the string. We're just going to right-click, copy, click the arrow on the left to collapse it, and then we'll select all this code inside this element. One trick we can do is to click the arrow on the left to collapse it, and then we'll select all this code, and we'll right-click. One trick we can do is, so we'll go to the first result, which is here, and let's copy all of the code inside this element. One trick we can do is to click the arrow on the left to collapse it, and then we'll select all this code, and we'll right-click, copy, and then inside our JavaScript file, inside the string, we're just going to right-click and paste the HTML. And if we need to fix the formatting, we can select all of this code, and then press Tab a few times to add some indents. And here we can remove the indent. And let's save. So now we're basically looping. So we'll go to the first result, which is here, and let's copy all of the code inside this element. One trick we can do is to click the arrow on the left to collapse it, and then we'll select all this code, and we'll right-click, copy, And if we need to fix the formatting, we can select all of this code, and then press Tab a few times to add some indents. And here we can remove the indent. And let's save. So now we're basically looping through the array of products, and for each product, we're creating all of the HTML that we had before. So we're generating this HTML using JavaScript. Now let's console.log this HTML to make sure that it's working. We'll scroll down to the bottom, and here, let's console.log the HTML that we just created. If we HTML using JavaScript. Now let's console.log this HTML to make sure that we had before. So now we're basically looping through the array of products, and for each product, we're creating all of the HTML that we had before. So we're generating this HTML using JavaScript. Now let's console.log this HTML to make sure that it's working. We'll scroll down to the bottom, and here, let's console.log the HTML that we just created. If we save, and then go back to our page, right-click and inspect, and click the console, you can see in the console that we just generated all this HTML, and we generated 3 of these. Let's go back to our code. And scroll up. Now, one problem here is that in the HTML that we generate, we don't want to have the name black and gray socks every time. For the second product, we want to have a different name and a different image. And for the third product, we want to have a different name and a different image.
Hi, I'm Jared, and I use Bittrex24 to manage projects because it gives me choice.
So how do we create slightly different HTML for each product? To do that, we're going to replace this part of the code with whatever the image property is. So for here, we're going to delete it, and we're going to insert the property image into this string. So to insert values into a template string like this, we can use $, open curly bracket, close curly bracket. And then inside here, we're going to insert the product.image property. So it's going to take whatever the image property is of the product and put it inside this HTML code. Same thing for the name. Instead of black and gray socks every time, we're going to delete this and then insert a value. We're going to insert the product dot, and we'll insert the name property this time into this HTML. So dot name. And we'll do the same thing for the other pieces of data. So for each product, the number of stars could be different. So instead of 4.5 every time, let's delete this, and we're going to insert the product's rating and stars. So product dot rating dot stars. One thing we have to watch out here for is that this image has to exist. So right now, if we substitute the product.ratings.stars into this, we will get this image. And if we go into our files by clicking here and open the images folder, and then open the ratings folder, we can see that there's no image called rating-4.5. Instead, there's an image called rating-45. So if the rating is 4.5, we should convert it into 45 so that this image actually exists. Similarly, if the rating is 4, we should convert it into 40 so that this image actually exists. So in here, we should actually multiply this by 10 so that this points to an actual image that exists here. Next, let's move on and we'll work on replacing the count. So we'll remove this and dollar curly brackets, and we'll replace it with the products dot rating dot and the count property. So count. And finally, we're going to replace the price for each product. So in here, we're going to remove this and substitute product dot price cents. And remember that this is a number in cents, but when we display it on the page, we want to display it as dollars. So we're going to divide this by 100 because there are 100 cents in each dollar. So now in the HTML that we're generating, we're actually inserting the details about each product. If we save and then go back to the console, right-click Inspect and Console, and look at the HTML that we generated, you'll see that it's different for each of the products. So that's how we use JavaScript to generate all the HTML here. So now the last step is we're going to combine all this HTML together into one string and put it on the web page. Let's go back into VS Code, and to combine all this HTML together, let's create a variable at the top for combining all the strings together. So we'll type let's call it products, capital HTML, and make it equal to an empty string to start. And then each time we go through the loop, we're going to add this HTML string up here. So instead of creating a new variable, we're just going to add products HTML equals itself products HTML plus this string. And remember, a short cut for this is to just type plus equals. So this is called the accumulator pattern. We loop through an array, and each time we're adding to the result. So we're accumulating the result. And now that we combine all the HTML into this variable, we can scroll to the bottom, and let's remove this line because this doesn't exist anymore. And then after the loop, let's console result. So we're accumulating plus this string. And remember, a shortcut for this is to just type plus equals. So this is each time we go HTML together into one string and put it on the web page. Let's go back into VS Code, and to combine all this HTML together, let's create a variable at the top for combining all the strings together. So we'll type let's call it products, capital HTML, and make it equal to an empty string to start. And then each time we go through the loop, we're going to add this HTML string up here. So instead of creating a new variable, we're just going to add products HTML equals itself products HTML plus this string. And remember, a shortcut for this is to just type plus equals. So this is called the accumulator pattern. We loop through an array, and each time we're adding to the result. So we're accumulating the result. And now that we combine all the HTML into this variable, we can scroll to the bottom, and let's remove this line because this doesn't exist anymore. And then after the loop, let's console.log the products HTML and save. And now if we go into our console, we combined all the HTML for all the products together. And now the last step is to take this HTML and put it on the page. And we can do that using the DOM. So let's go back into our code. And to use the DOM, we're first going to get an HTML element from the page and put it inside our JavaScript. So first, let's go to our HTML file. And remember that a product-container represents one of these products here. So we're going to look for this element here, a div products-grid. So this element contains all of our products. So we're going to use the DOM to take this element, put it into our JavaScript, and replace all the HTML inside. So to put this element in our JavaScript, we're going to give it a class. So let's add a class js-products-grid and save. And let's go into our JavaScript. So I'm just going to move this down to the bottom again so we can see it side by side. And then inside our JavaScript, at the bottom, we're going to use the DOM by typing document.querySelector, brackets, and a string. And we're going to type dot to select a class, and we're going to select js-products-grid. And we're going to use the DOM by typing document.querySelector, brackets, and a string. And we're going to type dot to select a class. And we're going to select js-products-grid. So the dot means we're going to look for a class called JS-products-grid, which is right here, and it's going to take this element and put it inside our JavaScript. And now we can change the HTML inside the element. To do that, we'll use the property .inner capital HTML, and we'll change it to the products HTML that we created above. So products capital HTML, and save. So it's not going to look any different, but now we're actually generating all the HTML with JavaScript and then using the DOM to put this HTML inside here. So now we can actually delete all of this because we're generating this with JavaScript. If we save this file, our products will will still be here because even though we deleted the HTML, we're now generating it with JavaScript.
Yep, that's right, over $10,000 in cash prizes where you can showcase your skills and creativity. Join us on.
Now, one problem that I see here all of this because we're generating this with JavaScript. If we save this file, our products will still be here because even though we deleted the HTML, we're now generating it with JavaScript. Now, one problem that I see here is that the price shows up with one decimal, but we actually want it to show up as 10.90. So let's scroll up to this part in the code. So we'll scroll up here and look for price cents. And the reason this happens is because price cents is 1090. So if we divide that by 100, the result is actually 10.9. If we want to force this to show two decimals like 10.90, we actually have a special method that we can use with a number. So here we can add brackets around this to make sure we calculate this number first. And numbers have a special method called .to capital fixed and brackets. So to fixed will convert a number into a string, but we can tell it how many decimals we want between the brackets. If we type so to fix first, and numbers have a special method called .to capital fixed and brackets. So to fixed will convert a number into a string, but we can tell it how many decimals we want between the brackets. If we type 2, it will show 2 decimals. So if we save, now it shows correctly on the page. If you're wondering how to find this method, you can find it by searching in Google or using an AI tool. Okay, let's take a break here and take a look at Git to see all the changes that we made. So I'm going to expand this here, and we're going to click the Git section. And it's going to tell us that we changed 2 files. If we click the HTML file, Git will tell us that we deleted all of the HTML code for the products, which is correct. If we open the JavaScript file, Git will tell us that we added all of this new JavaScript code, including the data and the loop for generating the HTML. So Git helps us track all of the changes that we made. So now let's actually take these changes and save them into Git so we can track new changes. At the top, let's type a message to describe the changes that we made. So let's type generate HTML with JavaScript. And click commit, and yes, if this shows up. So now let's talk about the benefit of generating the HTML. So let's close Git for now, and I'll move this to the side here. So the benefit of generating the HTML is that if we want to add another product, we don't have to copy paste all of this HTML again. All we need to do is to go up to the data and add the data for a new product. So let's do an example and add a fourth product to our list. So at the end here, let's type a comma and create another object. And let's go to the final project. And we'll scroll down to this fourth product here. So we're going to take the data about this product and save it in our JavaScript. So first, let's create a property image :string, and we're going to take this image and put it in here. To do that, we can right-click the image, inspect, and then we're going to copy this source attribute. So we can double-click it, and we can select this attribute, right-click, copy, and then inside our JavaScript, we're going to right-click and paste. And at the end, we'll type a comma and create the name property and a string, and we're going to select this name, right-click, copy, and then in here, right-click, paste, comma, and a rating property, an object. We have the stars, which is 5, and the count, which is 2,197. And at the end, we're going to add the price in cents, 1,899 cents. So now if we save this JavaScript file and then go back to our project and we scroll down, you'll notice that it automatically added the fourth product. And all we had to do was to add another object to our array. And then our loop will handle generating all the HTML for us. So you can see that generating the HTML with JavaScript is a lot easier than copy pasting this HTML every time. And that's why we use this technique. Next, we're going to add the rest of the products in the final project. Now, one thing we could do is to manually copy this over one by one, but to make this easier, inside the starting code, I've actually created a file that contains all the data. So if we scroll up and close this for now, and we're going to go to this data folder and open it. And inside this folder, I've provided a JavaScript file called products.js. And in here, it contains an array with the data for all the products in the final project. So we don't have to create it ourselves.
Guess what? 3 hours. In just 3 hours, I learned how to use ChatGPT and AI tools that.
So now let's use this products array in our code. So first, we need to load this file on our page. We can go to our amazon.html file and then scroll down to the bottom. And then at the bottom, in the script element, we're going to add another script element above it. So we'll type script, and then the source is going to be equal to this JavaScript file. So we'll type the folder called data, and then a slash to go into the folder and load the file products.js. So what this does is that it will run the files one by one. First, it will run the products.js file and create the array, and then it will run our amazon.js file and generate the HTML. So back here, let's save, and then go back into amazon.js. So now, instead of using our own products array, let's just use the products array in this file. So we'll go back to amazon.js, and we're just going to delete this array. So over here, we can click this arrow to collapse the code, and we're going to select it, and then just delete it, and save. So now this variable will be coming from this file. If we go back to our project and scroll down, you can see that we created all the products in our final project. So the way this works is that inside our amazon.html, we're loading 2 JavaScript files. And this JavaScript file creates all the products, and then this JavaScript file loops through the products and creates all the HTML. So keep in mind that script elements are loaded one by one, so the order matters. We have to first create the products array, and then we can use it. If these two were reversed, then the code wouldn't work. So this is how a real-world website JavaScript is created. We don't write all the HTML manually. Instead, we save the data for the website in a data structure like this, and then we use JavaScript to generate the HTML using the data. So now let's go into Git and look at our most recent changes. So here it will tell us that we changed 2 files. In the Amazon.html file, we added a script element, and then in the Amazon.js file, we deleted the products array that we created on our own. So let's type a message to describe our changes. Use products.js file, and then click commit. And yes. Now, one other thing I want to show you about Git is if we go back to our files here and then open Amazon.js, Git has a really useful feature called a history. So we can open this timeline section and then click this filter icon and only check Git history. And now you can see that we actually have a section, and then click this filter icon and only check Git history. And now you can see that we actually have a history of all of our changes for this file. So if we click the first line of the history, it will show us that. So we can open this timeline section and then click this filter icon, JS. Now, one other thing I want to show you about Git is if we go back to our files here and then open Amazon.js, Git has a really useful feature called a history. So we can open this timeline section and then click this filter icon and only check Git history. And now you can see that we actually have a history of all of our changes for this file. So if we click the first line of the history, it will show us that here we added all of the code, and then the second line in the history, we deleted this part of the code. So this gives us a step-by-step history of all the changes in our code. And in Git, this is called a version history. You can also see that the messages that we created when we commit show up here. And these messages help us understand what was changed in each version in the history. All right, so let's close this for now. And the last step in the process is to make it interactive. So let's take a look at our current project. So we'll go